The moment she said it, my ears rang. "You're too fragile to travel, Mom. Just watch the house, okay?" Rachel didn't even look up from her suitcase. She was zipping compartments, counting shoes, tapping her iPhone like this was just logistics. I stood in the doorway of her guest bedroom, gripping the hot mug she'd handed me. I hadn't drunk a sip. It was the same ginger, cinnamon tea I used to make for her when she had the flu in 7th grade. Now she handed it to me like a chore. I glanced at Kevin, her husband, who pretended to adjust the straps on Max's little roller bag. Ellie was chasing the cat with a plastic crown. No one said a word. I nodded slowly, like a good soldier. Then I drove home. Alone. It had snowed the night before in Missoula. Just a light dusting, but enough to turn the streetlights soft. I remember how the flakes stuck to the windshield wipers, how the pine trees looked dusted in powdered sugar. I sat in the driveway for a long time. The porch light flickered. The motion sensor hadn't worked right since Paul died. I never fixed it. Some things, I suppose, aren't meant to be repaired. Inside, I put the tea in the microwave but never hit start. I stared at the magnet collection on the fridge. Yellowstone, Banff, Bryce Canyon, places I took Rachel to before she could spell them, and taped beside them a photo of Paul and me. Iceland, 1989. We never made it. The phone buzzed. "Rachel again? Don't forget to check the basement window latch. We had a breeze last week." I silenced the screen. I walked upstairs, opened the setter drawer in my bedroom, and pulled out the green leather wallet where I kept my old passport. My fingers brushed the embossed eagle. Still valid. Still me. Downstairs, I saw it. A stack of papers they left on the kitchen counter. It was the printed itinerary, flight times, hotel confirmations, the columns of names. My name wasn't there, not even by mistake, not even as a maybe. I remember tracing the blank space with my index finger. Then I turned the page over, and there it was, a sticky note. Her handwriting. "Mom gets overwhelmed. Better she rests." The kettle began to whistle. But I didn't move. I thought of Paul. The way he laughed when I got lost in Rome and ordered soup for dessert. How he held my hand when turbulence hit. How he told me on his last birthday, "Go somewhere wild when I'm gone. Don't wait for permission." So I walked to my laptop. I typed, "One-way ticket, Reykjavik. Departing Tuesday." I didn't tell anyone. I just packed what I could carry and placed the itinerary back exactly where I found it. They said I was too fragile, but I remembered who I used to be. And this time I didn't ask to be seen. I chose to disappear on my own terms. The morning after Paul died, I made the bed twice. I fluffed his pillow, even though he would never lay his head on it again. I folded his flannel pajama pants and placed them on his side of the mattress. Then I sat in the hallway for almost an hour, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The quiet was so full it rang. That was the first day I realized I had no one to take care of. For 40 years, my name had always come last. Meredith the mother. Meredith the wife. Meredith who stayed behind when Paul took Rachel hiking. Meredith who missed her sister's wedding to make it to Rachel's first science fair. It wasn't that I regretted it. Not really. But somewhere in all that giving, I'd misplaced my shape. I became the outline that made their lives whole. Rachel never knew I declined a sabbatical in New Zealand because she begged me not to be away that summer. She doesn't remember I canceled a trip to see the Northern Lights when Paul caught the flu. Even Paul didn't realize I kept my dreams small because theirs were large. I didn't tell them. I just folded away the brochures, slid the guidebooks behind the cereal boxes, and said, "Maybe next year?" I told myself, there will be time. Later. Later never comes when you make it your enemy. That day, as I cleaned the pantry and cried quietly behind the paper towels, I found the Iceland travel guide Paul gave me on our 30th anniversary. Inside was a note scribbled in his square handwriting. "You're always caring for others. Let this one be yours. Let the land of fire and ice carry you back to yourself." I'd traced those words so many times they faded. But I still didn't go. Paul got busy with his clinic and I stayed useful. Rachel needed help with the twins. The roof needed patching. There was always something. Time passed in teaspoons, morning dishes, school drop-offs, grocery lists. I wore usefulness like a second skin. And somewhere I began to believe that being needed was the same as being loved. When Paul died, I packed away that skin, but I didn't know who I was without it. I tried. I joined a book club. I took watercolor. But even there, I found myself baking muffins and offering rides to appointments. I didn't know how to just exist, just Meredith. Then came the call from Rachel. "Italy, Greece, the Amalfi Coast? Family trip," she said. And just like that, the ember inside me sparked. Maybe this was it. The long-delayed moment. I imagined myself on a cobbled street, Giletto in hand, Rachel beside me, not as daughter and mother, but two women walking side by side. Then came the suitcase. The tea, the words, "You're too fragile to travel, Mom. Just watch the house." When I held the itinerary Rachel printed and saw my name missing, my hand shook. I wasn't just left behind. I was erased. Not even a placeholder on the page. Not even a text to say, "Next time, Mom." Just a sticky note. Better she rests. Rachel had always been strong-willed. Paul used to joke, "She gets that fire from you, Mir." But I don't think she remembers that I had a fire too, before diapers and dishes, before PTA meetings and packing lunches, before I became the background of my own life. I lit that fire again last night. I booked a ticket to Reykjavik, not for revenge, not to punish, but because something inside me whispered it's time, not time for drama, not for goodbye letters or grand speeches, time to return to a woman who once wanted to see the world and finally chose herself. The first message came before the sun did. "Don't forget the snow on the back deck. It ices fast." Then another, less than an hour later. "Ellie's cleats are in the laundry room. Could you move them to the garage bin? By mid-morning, there's an Amazon package arriving today, Max's shoes. Please bring it inside right away." 3 instructions, not questions. No greeting. No "how are you?" Just tasks as if I were still the housekeeper of their lives. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, hands wrapped around a mug that had long stopped steaming. I stared out the window, not really seeing the pale morning beyond it. My phone buzzed again. I didn't answer. Rachel wasn't checking in. She was giving orders, and I used to take them, gladly, quietly. I found pride in being needed. When she was young, every scribbled note asking for apples or glitter glue made me feel necessary. Back then, love wore the clothes of usefulness. But somewhere along the years, usefulness turned into expectation. And expectation turned into silence. No thanks, no pause, just more. I stood and walked to the window, opened it slightly. Cold air met my face, sharp and dry. Below, the snow had begun to melt, revealing brown grass and soggy footprints. A crow landed on the railing. Its eyes were dark, almost knowing. I watched it until it flew off, wings slicing through the morning. I used to be the quiet background hum in this family's life. Constant, unseen, assumed now I was something else. Rachel thought she was being efficient, delegating, she would say with pride. But these weren't tasks. They were reminders of who she thought I still was. The woman who stayed. The woman who said yes. The woman who didn't ask for more. I placed the phone face down. It buzzed again. "Kevin." "Hey, Meredith. Just wanted to say thanks again for handling things while we're away." Rachel mentioned the snow. "Hope it's not too much. Travel can be a lot at your age." At your age, I read those words slowly. Twice, they weren't cruel, just padded, careful. The way people speak when they've already decided something about you, but don't want to say it out loud. Wrapped in that message was a belief I couldn't ignore, that my best days were behind me. That I was finished. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to package doubt as love. But this one hit differently. Maybe because I just started to remember who I used to be. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked upstairs, opened the closet, pulled down the suitcase I hadn't touched in years. Still had the luggage tag from Paul's conference in San Diego. I laid it on the bed. The zipper gave a little resistance. My fingers hesitated. Not from weakness, from weight. The kind you carry inside one sweater. Then, too, a scarf Paul bought in Taos. My hiking boots, stiff but loyal, still smelling faintly of cedar and dust. I folded everything carefully, as if this small act of packing might stitch me back together. Every item I placed in that suitcase whispered, "You are not done. You are not invisible. You are still yours." Kevin meant well. They both did. But even well meant doubt is a cage. I zipped the bag slowly. Not because I was uncertain, but because this time the closure meant something. I wasn't running away. I was returning. To the parts of me I had paused for too long. To the version of Meredith who once dreamed, not just managed. And for the first time in years, I didn't wait for a door to open. I reached for the handle and opened it myself. The night before I left, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the light off, listening to the radiator hum, to the wind brushing bare branches against the window. The house creaked like it knew something was ending, or beginning. I wasn't sure which. At 20:15 a.m., I rose quietly, careful not to turn on any overhead lights, just the soft glow of the bathroom lamp. I moved like I used to when Rachel was a baby and I didn't want to wake her. Only now, I wasn't afraid of waking anyone. I was afraid of waking doubt. I put on my travel pants, the ones with the extra zippered pocket I hadn't worn in years. Then my hiking shoes. I checked the inside lining where Paul used to tuck in little napkins with sweet notes. "You've got this mirror?" There was nothing there, of course. Just the memory of him, folded into the fabric. The suitcase waited at the door. In the kitchen I made tea, not to drink, just for the smell. Ginger and lemon, the scent of beginnings. I wrote a short note. "Plants are watered. Mail is paused. I'll be safe, Meredith." No apology, no destination. I folded the paper in half, left it under a ceramic bowl. When I stepped outside, the cold met my cheeks like a gentle slap. "Awake now? Alive?" The taxi pulled up 5 minutes early. I appreciated that. No awkward waiting. Just motion. The driver was young. Didn't ask questions. Just loaded my bag, nodded politely, and drove. Missoula was still sleeping. Streetlights cast golden pools on the sidewalks, and porch lights flickered behind curtains. I looked out at the familiar houses. The mailbox shaped like a trout. The oak tree with a red ribbon. All the things I used to think grounded me. The airport was small. 2 security lines. 1 sleepy barista wiping down a counter. The kind of place where goodbyes usually happen with hugs and waves. I had none of that. Just my boarding pass, just my breath slow and steady. I sat near gate 4, hands folded in my lap, bag at my feet. The speakers announced the flight to Denver. Then a delay. Then nothing. I waited. Not impatiently, not nervously. Just waited. I was used to waiting. For decades I'd waited on others. For permission. For recognition, for time. But this waiting was different. This time I had chosen the silence. And inside it, I felt something shift, not joy. Not regret. Something quieter. Like peace warming its hands inside me for the first time in years. The plane to Denver was half full. I chose a window seat far from the chatter of 2 college girls arguing about chargers and snacks. Across the aisle, an elderly couple slept with matching neck pillows, leaning unconsciously toward each other. I turned my face to the glass. Montana disappeared beneath us, a patchwork of dark forest and curling rivers, then clouds. The world looked soft from above, forgiving. The flight attendant offered pretzels. I took them, not hungry, but needing something to do. The wrapper crinkled too loudly in the quiet. Between bites I imagined Rachel waking up, checking her phone. Maybe she'd see the note. Maybe she'd text. Maybe not. And if she did?
What would I say? Nothing, maybe.
Or just, "I'm safe." The layover in Denver was short. Just enough time to stretch my legs, refill my water bottle, and find gate B37. The sign above it read Reykjavik. It didn't feel real until then. I waited near the gate, next to a woman in her late 50s. Sharp gray bob, navy coat, a canvas backpack with a worn patch that said "Wander often." She looked down at her book, then up at me, then smiled. "First time?" she asked. I said. "You third." Iceland's honest. "Cold, but kind." We didn't say much after that, but her words settled in me like warm stones. When we boarded, I found my seat near the back. The plane was colder, the air recycled and dry. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and looked at the faces around me. Mostly younger, adventurous. Paired, I was alone. But I didn't feel lonely. Somewhere over the ocean, the lights dimmed. The hum of engines softened beneath my thoughts. I took out the old Iceland guidebook Paul had given me. The pages were yellowed, the corners curled, his handwriting still visible on the inside cover. "Go see the wild. Bring back something you can't name." I traced the words with my thumb. Then closed the book. I didn't need a name for this. Not yet. Outside the window, stars blinked over a sea of dark, the kind of dark you only find when leaving everything behind. And ahead, just hours away, was a place I'd never been. Not just a country, a version of myself I hadn't met yet. And finally I was ready. The plane touched down just after 6 a.m. Keflavik International sat beneath a blanket of fog. The runway lights blinked like distant fireflies through the mist. As I stepped off the jet bridge, the air met me like a secret. Crisp, damp, and completely unfamiliar. I followed the quiet crowd through immigration. No one rushed. Even the officer who stamped my passport did so gently, as if Iceland had no use for urgency. I paused before exiting, glancing down at the small navy book in my hand. My name still looked strange on its cover, like a permission slip I'd waited too long to sign. Outside, the cold wrapped around my legs, even through my travel pants. The wind here didn't shout. It whispered. Persistent low, like it knew I was new and wanted to test me. The taxi driver was a woman in her 40s, thick sweater, no makeup, eyes sharp but not unkind. Her name was Sigrid. She didn't talk much, and I liked that. We drove for nearly an hour, through stretches of lava rock and snow-covered plains. No trees, just sky and stone, and silence so deep it felt ancient. Paul would have loved this. He had a thing for places that made him feel small, said it kept his ego in check. When we first talked about Iceland, 30 years ago, he called it the edge of the world with a heartbeat. I didn't understand then. But now, with every mile we drove through emptiness, I started to feel it. My hotel sat just outside Reykjavik. Small, quiet, tucked beside a hill. Nothing fancy, but it looked like it belonged. At the front desk, a young man handed me a key, an actual metal key, not a card. "Breakfast is from 7 to 10, he said. "Thank you," I replied. My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. The room was simple wooden floors, a window that faced the harbor, a twin bed, wool blanket folded neatly at the foot. I set down my suitcase but didn't unpack. Instead, I stood by the window. The sea was a slate gray, rough and honest. Boats swayed gently in the wind. Beyond them, dark mountains sloped into the clouds like sleeping giants. I pressed my palm to the glass. I had come, without asking, without permission. And the world hadn't ended, it had just opened. I woke before the alarm. The sky outside was the soft blue of early winter mornings, where night hadn't fully left, and day wasn't yet convinced to stay. My breath misted the window as I leaned closer, watching boats shift gently in the harbor. I dressed slowly, layering wool over cotton, letting the silence of the room settle into my bones. Then I stepped outside. The wind greeted me like an old acquaintance, familiar now, though not gentle. It tugged at my scarf, slipped beneath my collar, but I didn't flinch. I walked along the shoreline path behind the hotel. Gravel crunched underfoot. The sea was louder here, churning against black volcanic rock. Birds called above, sharp and high. There was no one else in sight. No noise, no lists. Just breath, just motion. Each step forward felt like peeling back a layer I'd worn for decades. Guilt. Obligation. The need to be the one who always stayed. I reached a small overlook and stopped. The cliffs dropped into the sea like a sentence ending. I stood still. Let the air move through me. Let the wind calm through my hair like Paul used to. He would have laughed seeing me now. Boots dusted in black sand, cheeks flushed, eyes wet not from sadness but from wind and waking. "You made it, Mir," I imagined him saying.
"You did it. Not for him. For me."
That was the difference. Behind me, I heard footsteps. A woman passed, 50s maybe. Sturdy frame, silver braid, face lined with weather and wonder. She smiled as she passed. "First time here?" she asked, her accent lilting. "Yes," I answered. "And not the last." She nodded, then kept walking. I watched her go, confident, alone. Oh, maybe that was the kind of woman I was becoming. Maybe I'd always been her. Just buried. I sat on a bench carved from stone, the seat damp but solid beneath me. And I did nothing, just breathed. The sea didn't need me to fix it. The wind didn't ask for errands. The land didn't expect performance. It only asked that I show up. And for the first time in a long time, that was exactly what I wanted to do. The minivan was warm, smelled faintly of cinnamon gum and wool. I took the seat by the window's second row. Outside, frost clung to the glass in delicate swirls inside. The air buzzed with quiet conversation, the kind strangers make when they're still deciding who they are to each other. We were 7. 2 young couples, a man in his 60s with a large camera and thin gloves, a solo woman with curly hair and a backpack that looked like it had been places, and me. The guide, Arnie, was in his 30s, easy smile, windburned cheeks, his voice gentle, practiced, like someone who loved these lands and respected the quiet between sentences. "Today we'll see Zellingvellir, the geyser field, and Gullfoss," he said. "It's a lot of history, a lot of walking. Let me know if you need breaks." No one responded. We were all too polite, too early in the day. The road stretched long and silver ahead. Snow dusted the lava plains. Mountains crouched on the horizon like silent sentinels. We made small talk, where we were from, how long we'd stay. When it came to me, I just said Montana. First time? "That's brave," said one of the young women, 20 maybe. Pale pink hat, matching gloves. "My grandma wouldn't last an hour out here." She laughed. Not cruelly, just carelessly.
I smiled. Small. Didn't answer.
But something inside me paused, not broke, not boiled, paused. 10 years ago, that might have stung, might have made me shrink into the seat, question my place, replay the comment all day. But not now. Now I looked down at my boots, dusty from the path I'd already walked. The Iceland guidebook folded neatly in my coat pocket, my hands steady on my lap. I didn't need to explain myself to her. I'd already done the thing she couldn't imagine. The van slowed as we neared Zellingvellir. We stepped out into a wind that pushed, but didn't shove. Arnie led us through a narrow path flanked by tectonic plates. The earth cracked wide beneath us. A deep silence settled in the valley, the kind of quiet that makes you whisper. "This is where democracy began in Iceland," Arnie said. Right here, between these stones. People snapped pictures. I didn't. I just stood there, felt the weight of the place, the history, the cold, the deep, slow breath of time. Later at the geyser field, steam curled into the air like breath from the ground itself. The others leaned in for photos. I stepped back, watched, felt. Gullfoss came last. The falls roared, huge, hungry, magnificent. The kind of beauty that didn't ask to be admired. I walked to the edge, hand gripping the metal railing. Mist clung to my skin, my coat, my lashes, and for a moment I didn't feel old, or brave, or fragile, or strong. I just felt present, whole alive. The pink-hatted girl came to stand beside me, said nothing. Then softly, almost to herself, "I didn't think it'd be this intense." I nodded. She looked at me, then away. And that was enough. I returned to the hotel just after sunset. The lobby was quiet. A single lamp glowed in the corner, casting soft gold on the wooden floor. I nodded to the night attendant, who looked up from a paperback novel and smiled. No words passed between us, just the kind of acknowledgement that only solitude understands. In my room, I peeled off my coat and boots, rubbed warmth into my hands, then reached for the guidebook tucked into my satchel. I had carried it all day, but hadn't opened it once. Paul's handwriting greeted me from the inside cover, as it always did. Go see the wild. Bring back something you can't name. But something was different. The back flap stuck out, creased, a little torn. I turned there and found it. A small note folded into the binding. His handwriting again, but older, shakier. Not part of the original. "If you ever come here without me," it read, "find the red roof church above Iskagar. You'll know why." I stared at the words until they blurred. I had never seen this before. It must have been tucked in years ago. Quietly, intentionally, like a future gift wrapped in trust. I traced each letter with my finger. Skiugar? A town I hadn't marked on any tour. Farther south. Small, not on the popular list, but I remembered it from our maps. Paul always circled it, said it felt untouched. The next morning, I boarded a local bus. The landscape shifted as we moved south. More green under snow, more sheep dotting hillsides, more homes with turf roofs half sunk into earth. We stopped near the edge of town. I stepped off, feet hitting gravel that felt older than time. The air smelled of wet moss and distant sea. I walked, past quiet homes. A school with painted windows. A bakery with fog glass and no sign. Then I saw it. Perched on a small hill above the village, a red-roofed church, white walls glowing under pale sun. I climbed slowly. Each step felt like memory. When I reached the top, I stopped to breathe. Not from exertion, from reverence. The church was locked, but I didn't try the door. I sat on a bench nearby, looked out at the valley below. Wind brushed my cheek. A bird circled once, then disappeared. And then, without meaning to, I cried, not from grief, from knowing. Paul had been here. Or at least he'd known this was where I would need to go. Where the silence would hold me without asking. Where the world would not expect me to explain myself. And so I stayed. For an hour. Maybe more. Until the wind chilled my bones and the sun shifted behind the cliffs. Then I whispered, "Thank you," and walked back down the hill lighter than I had arrived. The bus ride back was quiet. Outside the window, the hills unspooled in reverse, soft curves and stone fences, steam rising from hidden springs. I leaned against the glass, forehead resting lightly, eyes open but unfocused. Skangar had shifted something in me, not like a door swinging wide, more like a hinge loosening, letting breath in where it had once stuck. At the hotel, I skipped dinner. I needed the silence, the kind that let you hear your own heartbeat and not feel lonely. I drew the curtains, lit the bedside lamp, turned the heater 2 notches up, then sat cross-legged on the bed with my journal open and blank. But I didn't write. Not at first. I held the pen for a long time, let it warm in my palm like an ember waiting for air. Then, instead, I reached for the hotel's flimsy desk chair, pulled my laptop toward me, and opened my email. Tal Meredith, subject none, and I began, "Dear Meredith, I see you not the helper, not the placeholder, not the mother or the wife, or the reliable background figure who smiles when spoken to and disappears when dismissed. You, the girl who used to want to sail around the fjords, the woman who danced barefoot on the porch when the rain came sideways, the one who memorized poems and whispered them at stoplights to feel less invisible. You were never gone. You were just busy being everything for everyone else. But tonight, this quiet Icelandic night, with the radiator clicking gently and your bones still humming from Skakagar, you are only yours. Don't let grief become your map. Let love be your compass. Let joy be enough, even when no one notices. Let this chapter be written without apology. Let softness guide you, not fear. Let that woman who sat on the hill in front of a red-roofed church know she did not come all this way in vain. She is still writing her story. She is still the author of what comes next. With all my breath, I paused. The screen glowed soft in the dark. The cursor blinked patient, unjudging. My fingers hovered above the keys, not shaking, but still unsure. Then I hit send. The message vanished into my own inbox. A letter to the woman I was still becoming. A line of permission I no longer needed from anyone but myself. I didn't cry. I didn't sigh. I simply closed the laptop, stood up, and turned off the lamp. The room shifted to shadows and hush. I crawled into bed, pulled the blanket to my chin, felt the weight of wool and warmth. Listened to the wind trace the corners of the room as if Iceland itself had paused to witness. And then, finally, I slept. Not because I was tired, but because I was whole. The phone rang at 4:03 a.m. I sat up slowly, heart already thudding, mind reaching through layers of sleep for the sound. Unknown number. U.S. country code. I knew before I answered. Mom! Rachel's voice cracked like thin ice. Are you okay? Where are you? I took a breath, looked out the window. The harbor was just beginning to turn silver. I'm in Iceland, I said softly. There was silence on the other end, then a sharp inhale. You what? You just left? I didn't just leave,
I said.
I arrived. The line went quiet again. A hum, then her voice. Tight, fast, the way she sounded when she thought everything depended on her control. I woke up and you weren't there. The neighbor said you got in a cab. Why would you do this without telling me? Without warning, as if I had become a risk, a storm, a hazard that required alert. Because, I said, I needed a moment in my life that wasn't narrated by someone else. That's not fair. Her voice trembled. I've done everything to support you. Have you? I asked, gently, not accusing. Or did you decide what support should look like and expect me to fit into it? She didn't answer. Outside, the first bird began to call, soft, uncertain. I'm not angry, I said. And I'm not running away. I just needed to remember I'm more than what's been expected of me. You could have told me. I tried, I said. And 100 small ways, with silences you didn't notice. With sentences I never finished, she exhaled sharply. Then quieter, you safe? Yes. Pause. Are you happy? I didn't answer right away, because happy wasn't the word. I'm becoming, I said. That's the better truth. Rachel didn't speak. I imagined her sitting in her kitchen, barefoot, mug in hand, hair pulled back. The same way I used to look at her when she was 5 and afraid of the dark. I'm not angry either, she said. Just surprised. I understand. We stayed on the line for another minute. 2 women, once tethered by need, now separated by a silence that felt, finally, respectful. I'll call again later, she said. I'll answer, I replied, and I meant it, not out of duty but out of choice. After Rachel hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. The sky outside had shifted from silver to soft gold. A promise of morning.
I made tea. Black.
No sugar, and watched the steam curl toward the ceiling like a quiet blessing. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. And that stillness was enough. I pulled the small writing kit from my suitcase, a habit I'd kept since Paul gave it to me on our 25th anniversary. Brown leather cover. A few envelopes. A fountain pen I hadn't used in years. I chose the heaviest paper, cream-textured. It smelled faintly of cedar. And then I wrote. Not to Paul. Not to Rachel, myself. Dear Meredith, you have surprised me. Not with where you've gone, but with how much of yourself you've finally allowed to come forward. I used to think the quiet made you disappear. Now I see it's where you gather. You are not invisible. You are not broken. You are simply returning. To the girl who read novels under blankets. To the woman who could hold both grief and gratitude in the same breath. To the voice that never needed to be loud to be true. There will be days you'll doubt this version of you, when the old rhythms knock and the guilt creeps back in, wearing familiar shoes. Let them knock, you do not have to answer. You owe no explanation for choosing joy. You have already given enough, and now you belong to yourself. I stopped. Blotted the ink, folded the page, no envelope. I tucked it into my coat pocket, the one near my heart, not to mail, to carry. Because sometimes the words we need most are the ones only we can give ourselves. Outside, the harbor shifted from gold to blue. And inside, so did I. The road to Gullfoss looked different this time. Maybe it was the light softer, less dramatic than before. Or maybe it was me. I had rented a small hatchback. The man at the counter raised his eyebrows when I handed over my license, but said nothing. I appreciated that. The drive took just under 2 hours. No music, just the rhythmic hum of tires over snow-dusted pavement and the occasional whisper of wind against the windows. I drove slower than I needed to. Not from fear, from reverence. When I arrived, the parking lot was nearly empty. Only 2 other cars. A tour bus was just pulling away, its exhaust curling into the cold like a vanishing thought. I walked toward the path alone. The falls roared ahead. This time, I didn't stop at the railing. I climbed the narrow trail that curved to the right, higher ground, overlooking everything. Each step pressed soft earth and ice beneath my boots. My breath came in visible puffs. My fingers curled inside wool gloves. At the top, I stood. Wind whipped my coat open, but I let it. I pulled the letter from my coat pocket. The one I had written to myself, still folded, still unread. I looked at it, then at the water below. Gullfoss churned with force, but also rhythm, a kind of relentless grace. Power without malice, and I thought, maybe that's what I had learned here. To be strong without apology. To be soft without shame. I held the letter in both hands, let the wind press against the paper. Then I released it. It flew for a second, hovered, twisted, and finally dipped, caught in the wind's fingers, carried down toward the mist. I watched until I couldn't see it anymore. Not to lose it, to let it belong. Back to the water, back to the world, back to me in a way. I stood there for a while longer. No epiphany, just breath, just presence. Then I turned and began the walk back down, lighter, but fuller, too. The cafe sat alone by the roadside, its roof blanketed in snow, windows fogged from within. I pulled into the gravel lot, engine ticking as it cooled. Inside it was warm. Wooden beams overhead, shelves lined with mugs that didn't match. A chalkboard menu leaned slightly to one side, listing things like lamb stew and cinnamon bread in careful handwriting. I ordered coffee. The woman behind the counter, older, with soft shoulders and a thick braid, poured it into a mug that said, Fram May Some Jaree. I didn't know what it meant, but I smiled anyway. I sat by the window. Steam rose from the coffee. It smelled like earth and comfort. Outside, a man scraped snow from the step with an old broom. 2 kids in red coats kicked at frozen slush and laughed. I reached into my bag, pulled out the small stack of postcards I'd picked up in Reykjavik. I hadn't touched them. Until now. I chose one with a photo of the northern lights over a black sand beach. Flipped it over, then paused. This wasn't for Rachel, or Ellie, or anyone expecting something. This was for the silence. For the woman sitting in this cafe, hand curled around a ceramic mug, no longer asking permission. I began to write. Dear home, I've remembered myself here, not in the dramatic places, though Iceland is full of them, but in the spaces between. The walk along the harbor, the quiet hotel room, the hill above a red-roofed church, the sound of my own breath in a country that never needed me to be anything but present. I am not someone's mother right now, or widow, or guest, or burden. I am Meredith, and that is enough. Love me. I sat back. Read it once. Didn't edit. I slipped the card into an envelope, added no return address. Just the destination, my house in Missoula. The kitchen table. Let it be a future reminder, a time capsule, a breadcrumb. When the mug was empty, I stood. The woman behind the counter smiled again. I nodded. Stepped out into the cold. It didn't bite this time, it welcomed. And as I dropped the postcard into the small blue mailbox near the door, I felt something settle. Not an ending. A route. The sun was beginning to sink as I turned onto the Overlook Road. It wasn't on any tourist map, just a narrow gravel path that forked off the highway. Paul had circled it on one of our old guidebooks years ago. A scribbled note beside it ready, try at sunset if you can. I parked beneath a line of wind-stunted pines. The car engine clicked softly as it cooled. I zipped my coat, pulled on my gloves, and followed the short trail up. The hill rose gently, then opened to a view so wide it made me still. To the west, the sun hovered just above the horizon, casting long gold streaks across the snowy plains. The light made everything look gentler, the rocks, the drifts, even the fence posts leaned into it. I sat on a bench carved from dark basalt, its surface cold but smooth. No one else was there, and that mattered, because for once, there was no need to perform. I let my body relax, shoulders down, jaw unclenched, hands resting in my lap. I watched the sky burn itself into soft violet and rose, and I thought, this is enough. No parade, no resolution, just a woman on a hill facing west. Paul would have loved this light. He would have squeezed my hand and said something like, it makes you look like you belong here. Maybe I do, not just here, in Iceland, but here, in my skin, in my age, in this moment. For so long, I'd waited for others to approve my living, to tell me when it was okay to pause, to want to go. But no one's voice had ever sounded quite right. And now, as the sky pulled its curtain of dusk over the land, I realized something simple: I don't have to wait anymore. Not for permission. Not for someone else to change. Not even for forgiveness. I stood just as the sun slipped behind the last ridge. The wind lifted, tugged gently at my scarf. And I whispered, not loudly, not to the sky, but to myself, "We're doing just fine." Then I walked back to the car, the path glowing faintly in the last breath of light, and the road stretched ahead, open, waiting. Not to be escape, but to be chosen. I was packing when the email came. Subject line: Iceland. Tomorrow? The sender: Rachel. No greeting, no explanation. Just one line beneath it: "If you're still there, I want to meet. Just tell me where." I sat on the edge of the bed, suitcase half zipped, sweater still in my hands. My first instinct was resistance, not because I didn't want to see her, but because I wasn't sure which version of myself she was coming to find. I stared at the email, then slowly typed 3 words: Hotel Eldasai, 5 p.m. No flourish, no emojis. No, please. Just a point on the map. The next afternoon, I sat in the hotel cafe, not at the window this time, but farther in, away from the view, tucked into a booth with soft cushions and a table big enough for 2. I wore a blue scarf Paul had once complimented. Something about the way it brought out my eyes. That was long ago. But today I wanted to feel seen. The clock ticked quietly behind the counter. Then the door opened. Rachel stepped in, her coat unzipped, cheeks pink from the cold, hair pulled into a bun that was already falling loose. She looked tired, but real. She spotted me, walked over slowly, as if each step required its own kind of courage. "Hi?" she said. "Hi." We didn't hug, not out of anger, but because neither of us knew what would feel honest. She slid into the seat across from me, took off her gloves, set them in her lap. Her hands didn't tremble, but they were restless, folding, unfolding. "I almost didn't come," she said. "I know." She glanced around the room. A couple sat by the fire in the corner. The rest of the cafe was quiet, the kind of quiet that invites only the truth. "I didn't come to argue," she said. "Good," I replied, "because I wouldn't stay for that." Rachel smiled faintly, not out of amusement, but recognition. "You look different," she said after a pause. "I feel different." She looked down, then back up. "I didn't know how to be your daughter when you stopped acting like a mother." I took a slow breath, and I didn't know how to keep being your mother when I forgot how to be myself. That hung between us, not like a fight, but like a wound finally named. Outside, snow began to fall again. Light, gentle. Rachel reached for the mug in front of her, took a sip, then asked, "Do we have time?" "Some," I said. "And maybe we can use it better now." I was packing when the email came. Subject line: Iceland. Tomorrow, the sender: Rachel. No greeting, no explanation, just one line beneath it: "If you're still there, I want to meet. Just tell me where." I sat on the edge of the bed, suitcase half zipped, sweater still in my hands. My first instinct was resistance, not because I didn't want to see her, but because I wasn't sure which version of myself she was coming to find. I stared at the email, then slowly typed 3 words: Hotel Eldasai, 5 p.m. No flourish, no emojis, no please. Just a point on the map. The next afternoon I sat in the hotel cafe, not at the window this time, but farther in, away from the view, tucked into a booth with soft cushions and a table big enough for 2. I wore a blue scarf Paul had once complimented. Something about the way it brought out my eyes. That was long ago. But today I wanted to feel seen. The clock ticked quietly behind the counter, then the door opened. Rachel stepped in. Her coat unzipped, cheeks pink from the cold, hair pulled into a bun that was already falling loose. She looked tired, but real. She spotted me, walked over slowly as if each step required its own kind of courage. "Hey," she said. "Hi." We didn't hug, not out of anger, but because neither of us knew what would feel honest. She slid into the seat across from me, took off her gloves, set them in her lap. Her hands didn't tremble, but they were restless, folding, unfolding. "I almost didn't come," she said. "I know." She glanced around the room. A couple sat by the fire in the corner. The rest of the cafe was quiet. The kind of quiet that invites only the truth. "I didn't come to argue," she said.
"Good," I replied.
"Because I wouldn't stay for that." Rachel smiled faintly, not out of amusement, but recognition. "You look different," she said after a pause. "I feel different." She looked down, then back up. "I didn't know how to be your daughter when you stopped acting like a mother." I took a slow breath, and I didn't know how to keep being your mother when I forgot how to be myself. That hung between us, not like a fight, but like a wound finally named. Outside, Snow began to fall again, light.
Gentle.
Rachel reached for the mug in front of her, took a sip, then asked, "Do we have time?" "Some," I said. "And maybe we can use it better now." After coffee, we bundled up and stepped outside. The sky had dimmed to a pale gray blue. Snowflakes drifted slowly, weightless, like they were unsure whether to fall or float. We walked side by side down a quiet lane that led toward the harbor. We didn't speak for a while. The silence between us no longer felt like avoidance. It felt like space. Rachel tucked her hands into her pockets. "Do you think you'll come back?" she asked. I paused. "To Montana?" She nodded. "Yes," I said, "but not the same way." We reached the end of the lane. Boats rocked gently in the water, their ropes creaking against metal rings. She turned to me. Her eyes were softer now, less guarded. "I was scared you left because of me." "I left," I said, "because I didn't want to lose myself quietly." A gull cried overhead. Rachel looked at me for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, not a hug, just close, and whispered, "I'm glad you didn't." I smiled. For the first time in years, the space between us didn't ache. It breathed. The wind in Montana felt different now. It was drier, sharper, but it didn't bother me like it used to. I stepped out of the cab and took a long breath in. The driveway crunched under my boots. Snow still clung to the edges, though most of it had melted. Winter here was always late to leave. The house looked the same, but I didn't. I walked up the steps slowly, not from fatigue, but to feel every inch of return, each creak of wood underfoot, each smell pine cleaner, old heating vents, the faintest memory of cinnamon. Inside, it was quiet. Not empty, just quiet. Rachel had stopped by earlier, according to the note on the counter. A loaf of bread, a few groceries. Her way of saying welcome without needing to be present. I set my bags down, removed my coat, then walked into the kitchen. And there it was. The postcard, the one I mailed from Iceland. Propped against a salt shaker on the table, I picked it up, ran my fingers over the ink, now slightly faded. My own handwriting looked unfamiliar, like a version of me I'd met only briefly. "Dear home, I've remembered myself here." I read the rest silently, then smiled. It was real. All of it. Not just a dream wrapped in mist and language I couldn't pronounce. The radiator hissed softly. A truck passed on the street outside. I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the light streaming through the kitchen window. I didn't need to do anything big. I just needed to live from here. From the quiet strength I'd found. The part of me that no longer asked for permission, that didn't need to be needed in order to matter. I looked around the kitchen. Same table, same chair. But when I sat down, it felt like it belonged to someone new. Someone I was learning to recognize. Someone I wasn't afraid to be anymore. The wind in Montana felt different now. It was drier, sharper. But it didn't bother me like it used to. I stepped out of the cab and took a long breath in. The driveway crunched under my boots. Snow still clung to the edges, though most of it had melted. Winter here was always late to leave. The house looked the same. But I didn't. I walked up the steps slowly. Not from fatigue, but to feel every inch of return. Each creak of wood underfoot, each smell pine cleaner, old heating vents, the faintest memory of cinnamon. Inside, it was quiet, not empty, just quiet. Rachel had stopped by earlier, according to the note on the counter. A loaf of bread, a few groceries. Her way of saying welcome without needing to be present. I set my bags down, removed my coat, then walked into the kitchen. And there it was, the postcard, the one I mailed from Iceland. Propped against a salt shaker on the table, I picked it up, ran my fingers over the ink, now slightly faded. My own handwriting looked unfamiliar, like a version of me I'd met only briefly. "Dear home, I've remembered myself here." I read the rest silently, then smiled. It was real. All of it, not just a dream wrapped in mist and language I couldn't pronounce. The radiator hissed softly. A truck passed on the street outside. I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the light streaming through the kitchen window. I didn't need to do anything big. I just needed to live from here, from the quiet strength I'd found. The part of me that no longer asked for permission, that didn't need to be needed in order to matter. I looked around the kitchen. Same table, same chair. But when I sat down, it felt like it belonged to someone new. Someone I was learning to recognize, someone I wasn't afraid to be anymore. Later that afternoon, I opened the back door and stepped into the yard. The garden was still asleep. Dead stems poked through frostbitten soil. But beneath, I knew the roots waited. I walked to the spot where Paul and I once planted lavender. Nothing bloomed there now, but I knelt anyway, ran my hand through the earth, still cold, still stubborn, but ready. I fetched the watering can from the shed. It was dusty, half-cracked. I rinsed it out, filled it from the spigot. Then I poured a slow, steady stream over the soil. A quiet ritual, a promise, maybe, not to return to what was, but to tend what could still grow. The wind picked up slightly, stirring the bare branches above me, and I whispered, not to Paul, not to Rachel. To the earth, to myself, it's not about returning to who I was. It's about rooting who I've become. The sun broke through the clouds, and for the first time in a long while, I stayed still. Not waiting, but arriving. I didn't rush back inside. I sat on the steps, hands still dusted with soil, letting the last of the afternoon light warm my face. Somewhere down the street, wind chimes rang faintly. The world wasn't new, but I was no longer waiting for it to be. For years, I had measured myself by roles I fulfilled, love I gave, silence I endured. But now, I measured my life by presence, by truth, by roots I chose, not ones handed to me. And in that stillness, no applause, no audience, something inside me whispered, you did not vanish, you bloomed. Quietly, but fully. And that was enough.